In the modern world, freedom is often celebrated as the ultimate value, the pinnacle of human progress. We live in an age where choices abound: career paths, personal identities, relationships, lifestyles, philosophies of life, options that earlier generations could scarcely imagine. Yet, for all its promise, this abundance of choice can feel overwhelming. Søren Kierkegaard, often called the father of existentialism, described anxiety as the dizziness of freedom, the vertigo we feel when confronted with limitless possibilities. His insight suggests that freedom is both a gift and a burden, for it forces us to stand at the edge of uncertainty, compelled to decide without guarantees. Jean-Paul Sartre took this further, insisting that we are condemned to be free, meaning that even when we try to avoid responsibility, we are still choosing to evade, to defer, to submit. Religious traditions also grapple with this paradox. Christianity teaches that free will is central to our moral responsibility before God, but also warns that unchecked freedom can lead us into sin. Buddhism suggests that liberation comes not from multiplying choices, but from freedom from desire itself, the realization that craving only perpetuates suffering. Islam emphasizes submission. Islam itself means submission, not as a negation of freedom, but as a higher form of alignment with divine order, which relieves the anxiety of limitless self-direction. These perspectives highlight that freedom, in its deepest sense, is not simply the ability to choose anything, but the responsibility of choosing well. Literary voices echo this tension. Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground portrays a man paralyzed by choice, unable to commit to action because he fears every outcome. Milan Kundera's The Unbearable Lightness of Being reflects on the dizzying weight, or lightness, of living in a world where choices define us, yet carry no cosmic guarantee of meaning. Viktor Frankl, drawing on his experiences in Nazi concentration camps, reminds us in Man's Search for Meaning that the last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any circumstance. So, as we begin this journey, the question arises: does modern freedom empower us, or does it secretly bind us? Do we celebrate choice, or do we drown in it? The answer may depend not on the number of paths before us, but on the courage with which we walk one. Before we examine the burdens of freedom, we need to define it. Philosophers have long debated what freedom truly entails. For Kant, freedom is the ability to act according to reason and moral law, not merely to act on desire. Sartre insists that freedom is absolute. Humans are condemned to it, even when they feel trapped, because every choice, even inaction, is still a choice. Kierkegaard emphasizes that freedom produces anxiety because it confronts us with infinite possibilities and no guarantees of the right choice. Religions offer complementary perspectives. Christianity frames freedom as a gift from God, a capacity to choose virtue and moral good, but warns that misuse leads to sin and suffering. Buddhism suggests that liberation is freedom from craving. Excessive attachment to choices breeds suffering, not satisfaction. Islam teaches that submission to divine guidance paradoxically enhances freedom, for it reduces the existential burden of deciding everything independently. Literature illuminates the tension between freedom and meaning. Dostoevsky's Underground Man embodies the paralysis that can arise when freedom becomes overwhelming. In contemporary life, freedom often feels like a luxury that carries its own costs: decision fatigue, regret, and fear of making the wrong choice. Modern technology multiplies options, from careers to social media to consumer goods, amplifying both opportunity and anxiety. Even the smallest decisions, what to eat, whom to love, which information to consume, can feel weighted with moral and existential significance. Philosophers warn that freedom without reflection may lead not to happiness, but to despair. Therefore, understanding freedom is not merely academic. It is essential to living authentically and meaningfully. Existentialist thinkers warn that freedom carries inherent anxiety. Kierkegaard called it the dizziness of freedom, the vertigo we feel when the world offers endless paths with no guarantees. Sartre emphasizes that this anxiety stems from the realization that we alone are responsible for our choices and cannot blame fate, God, or society for our decisions. The modern world amplifies this experience with limitless options and constant information. Psychologists call this decision fatigue. When faced with too many possibilities, our cognitive and emotional resources are depleted. Buddhism would observe that attachment to outcomes intensifies suffering. Wanting the best choice creates anxiety because perfect knowledge is impossible. Christian thought reminds us that freedom entails moral responsibility, not mere preference. Choosing wrongly can have spiritual and ethical consequences. Dostoevsky's characters often face this paralysis, trapped in self-conscious reflection that prevents action. Literature from Milan Kundera explores similar territory. The more options we have, the more burdensome they become. Even seemingly trivial decisions, what to wear, what to eat, can accumulate and weigh heavily on the psyche. Modern social media intensifies this, offering infinite comparisons that create regret, envy, and fear of missing out. Viktor Frankl would argue that anxiety is an opportunity. Confronting it forces us to identify what truly matters. Yet the temptation is to escape, to outsource decisions to routines, technology, or external authorities. Conscious awareness of this anxiety is the first step in transforming it from paralyzing burden to tool for authentic choice. Freedom cannot exist without responsibility. Sartre famously argued that humans are condemned to freedom because we cannot escape the ethical weight of our choices. Every decision, whether monumental or mundane, shapes our character, our relationships, and the world we inhabit. Kierkegaard stresses that anxiety emerges because we recognize the stakes of freedom and that the authentic life requires accepting responsibility willingly. Religion offers additional layers of interpretation. Christianity frames freedom as a gift that is morally accountable. Our choices reflect our character and adherence to divine law. Buddhism teaches that mindful action mitigates suffering. Freedom untempered by awareness creates suffering, but conscious responsibility transforms it into meaningful action. Islam emphasizes that freedom is not the absence of structure, but aligned with moral guidance. True liberty comes from living in accordance with divine principles. Literature repeatedly shows the human struggle with responsibility. In Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, the protagonist wrestles with moral freedom and the consequences of transgression. Kundera's novels explore the interplay of choice, guilt, and the subtle weight of everyday decisions. Modern life presents unique challenges. Social media, career paths, and consumer abundance make every choice seem morally and socially significant. Failure to act responsibly can lead to regret, social consequences, and internal conflict. Conversely, embracing responsibility can convert freedom into empowerment. The key lies not in maximizing options, but in choosing consciously, with reflection on values, ethics, and long-term impact. True freedom is therefore inseparable from intentional responsibility. Although freedom is celebrated, too much choice can be paralyzing. Psychologists describe this as choice overload. The more options available, the harder it is to make satisfying decisions. Even when decisions are made, regret often follows. The paradox of choice, as Barry Schwartz calls it. Existentialists echo this insight. Freedom without structure can trap us in endless deliberation. Kierkegaard describes anxiety as the inevitable companion of boundless freedom, reminding us that human beings are finite, yet the possibilities are infinite. Sartre emphasizes that every choice implicates us morally, and the weight can be crushing if we are unprepared. Literary examples abound. Dostoevsky's Underground Man refuses action because every option seems fraught with ethical and existential consequences. Kundera explores how modern abundance can produce a sense of emptiness, as infinite choices erode the sense of meaningful commitment. Religion provides guidance. Christianity encourages discernment and moral reasoning to navigate freedom wisely. Buddhism teaches that attachment to having it all intensifies suffering, and that freedom is best exercised with detachment and mindfulness. Islam suggests that surrender to divine wisdom alleviates the burden of excessive self-directed choice. Modern technology exacerbates the problem, from social media comparison to career mobility to lifestyle marketing. Recognizing the limits of our capacities is crucial. Even freedom itself must be managed with intentionality. True liberation is not in infinite options, but in disciplined, conscious selection aligned with one's values. Existentialist philosophy is central to understanding the burden of freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that humans are condemned to be free, meaning that freedom is unavoidable, and the responsibility it brings is inescapable. Every choice, even avoiding choice, carries consequences for self and others. Kierkegaard highlights that this recognition produces existential anxiety, but anxiety is also a doorway to authenticity, compelling us to confront life deliberately. Simone de Beauvoir emphasized that freedom is not only personal but social. Our choices affect others, and ethical responsibility is intertwined with autonomy. Literature dramatizes these ideas vividly. Dostoevsky portrays characters frozen by moral and existential uncertainty, while Milan Kundera examines how the lightness or weight of being arises from freedom itself. Viktor Frankl suggests that meaning arises from the responsible exercise of freedom, even in the harshest circumstances. Religion intersects here. Christianity teaches that freedom is the stage upon which moral character is exercised. Buddhism reframes freedom as liberation from desire, shifting the burden from external choice to inner mastery. Islam interprets submission to divine guidance as enabling authentic freedom without the paralysis of total self-determination. Modern society magnifies existential dilemmas, with digital abundance and social expectation complicating decision-making. Recognizing the tension between freedom and responsibility is crucial for mental and spiritual health. Awareness transforms freedom from an overwhelming weight into a tool for crafting a meaningful life. In today's world, decision paralysis is increasingly common. The abundance of options, from careers to relationships to consumer goods, creates cognitive overload. Psychologists call this analysis paralysis, a state in which too many options prevent action altogether. Kierkegaard's anxiety of freedom echoes here. Too much possibility can overwhelm finite human faculties. Sartre emphasizes that avoidance is still a choice, highlighting the ethical weight of indecision. Literary depictions underscore this. Dostoevsky's underground man refuses engagement, trapped in contemplation rather than action. Kundera illustrates how seemingly minor decisions can accumulate, producing existential heaviness. Religion offers guidance. Christianity teaches discernment, using moral principles to navigate complex choices. Buddhism recommends detachment, mindfulness, and focus on essentials to reduce the burden of decision-making. Islam emphasizes consultation, prayer, and adherence to divine guidance to navigate life wisely. In practical life, social media, career options, and lifestyle marketing constantly bombard us with choices, intensifying fatigue and regret. Even minor decisions, like selecting entertainment or daily routines, contribute to cumulative stress. Recognizing decision fatigue is the first step toward intentionality. By clarifying values and priorities, we can act decisively without being paralyzed. Ultimately, modern life requires balancing freedom with structured reflection to preserve both autonomy and peace of mind. Freedom offers tremendous potential. With choice comes the possibility to live authentically and pursue our passions. Yet, too much freedom can diminish satisfaction with our decisions. Psychologists have documented the paradox of choice, in which more options often lead to less contentment. Even when we make the best choice, regret may follow, wondering if another option was better. Kierkegaard would describe this as the inevitable anxiety of human freedom, the dizziness that arises from confronting infinite possibility. Sartre emphasizes that we bear ultimate responsibility for these choices, which can feel burdensome. Literature illustrates these struggles. Dostoevsky's characters often wrestle with regret and indecision, while Kundera explores the tension between lightness and heaviness in human freedom. Religion offers guidance. Christianity encourages moral reflection to navigate overwhelming options. Buddhism emphasizes mindful focus on essentials, and Islam provides structure through adherence to divine guidance. Modern society amplifies the stress. Social media, consumerism, and career pressures create an endless array of paths. Yet, recognizing this paradox allows us to reclaim freedom by consciously limiting choices and aligning them with values. True happiness comes not from quantity, but from thoughtful, deliberate engagement. Balancing opportunity with intentional focus transforms freedom from a source of anxiety into a tool for meaningful living. Freedom is deeply linked to identity. Every choice we make defines our character and the story we tell about ourselves. Sartre asserts that we are the sum of our choices, meaning identity is actively constructed through action. Kierkegaard would add that confronting freedom authentically reveals our true self, while avoidance conceals it. Literature captures this vividly. Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground examines how indecision and avoidance shape a fragmented self, and Kundera explores identity as fluid, influenced by the multiplicity of choices in modern life. Religion frames identity through moral and spiritual dimensions. Christianity sees the cultivation of virtue as an expression of freedom and selfhood. Buddhism emphasizes mindful living as a way to shape the self free from destructive attachments. Islam integrates identity with divine purpose, suggesting freedom is meaningful when choices align with spiritual law. Modern life presents a tension between self-expression and societal expectation, often creating conflict between who we are and what we should choose. The abundance of options can fragment identity, while reflection and intentionality unify it. Understanding freedom's role in shaping identity empowers us to act authentically. Choices are not just practical, they are existential statements about who we are. Therefore, exercising freedom consciously is central to cultivating a coherent, meaningful self. Freedom is not purely personal, it carries social consequences. Sartre emphasizes that human freedom is intertwined. Our choices affect others, making responsibility inherently relational. Kierkegaard reminds us that anxiety arises because our actions influence not only ourselves, but the community. Literature depicts this vividly. Dostoevsky examines the social ramifications of moral choices, illustrating guilt, alienation, and redemption. Kundera explores how small personal decisions resonate in larger societal structures. Religions frame freedom in communal terms. Christianity teaches that ethical freedom is exercised in service to love and neighbor. Buddhism stresses interdependence and compassion in mindful action, and Islam highlights collective responsibility alongside individual freedom. In modern society, choices in careers, consumption, and lifestyle often have global repercussions, from economic inequality to environmental impact. The abundance of freedom may generate ethical stress. We are aware that each decision carries consequences we cannot fully control. Social media and digital networks amplify these effects, making actions more visible and scrutinized. Yet, understanding the communal dimension of freedom allows us to act responsibly and thoughtfully. Ethical reflection and mindfulness convert the burden of freedom into an opportunity for positive social impact. Exercising freedom with awareness strengthens character, fosters trust, and nurtures community well-being. Freedom is therefore a shared responsibility, not merely an individual luxury. Freedom is both exhilarating and terrifying. Existentialist thinkers like Sartre highlight that awareness of unlimited choice produces a unique anxiety, or angst, because each decision carries ultimate responsibility. Kierkegaard frames this as the dizziness of freedom, the feeling that arises when confronted with infinite possibilities and the weight of moral consequences. Modern psychology echoes this. The paradox of choice can lead to indecision, regret, and dissatisfaction. Literature shows us the lived experience of choice anxiety. Dostoevsky's characters wrestle with moral and personal dilemmas, highlighting the emotional burden of decision-making. Kundera explores the subtle interplay between freedom, consequence, and the heavy responsibility of living intentionally. Religious traditions offer frameworks for managing this anxiety. Christianity encourages prayer and moral reflection to guide difficult choices. Buddhism recommends mindfulness and focusing on what truly matters to reduce distraction and suffering. Islam emphasizes following divine guidance while acknowledging human responsibility, providing structure amid uncertainty. In our hyper-connected, fast-paced modern world, we face countless daily choices, from careers and relationships to moral and social decisions. Anxiety often arises when we feel incapable of controlling the outcomes or fear regret. Yet, awareness of the burden itself can be liberating. Recognizing anxiety as a signal encourages reflection and prioritization. Structured decision-making, intentional limits, and value-centered living help transform anxiety from paralysis into motivation. Embracing freedom responsibly allows us to act with purpose rather than reaction. Freedom is inseparable from responsibility. Sartre insists that humans are condemned to be free, bearing full accountability for choices. Kierkegaard emphasizes that this responsibility is not abstract. It shapes the authenticity of our lives and the depth of our moral character. Literature exemplifies this. Dostoevsky's characters endure suffering and guilt when they evade responsibility, while Kundera examines the ethical implications of small, seemingly inconsequential decisions. Religion frames responsibility within moral and spiritual contexts. Christianity teaches that freedom is meaningful when exercised in love and justice. Buddhism encourages mindful choices that reduce suffering for oneself and others. Islam emphasizes moral responsibility aligned with divine guidance. In modern society, the sheer volume of choices, from consumption to career, health, and social behavior, magnifies the weight of responsibility. Technology and social media amplify accountability, making actions highly visible and socially impactful. Responsibility transforms freedom from mere autonomy into a moral and existential tool. When we acknowledge consequences, even small ones, freedom becomes a vehicle for growth, integrity, and ethical living. Recognizing this allows us to prioritize values, mitigate regret, and cultivate deliberate, meaningful lives. Freedom without responsibility risks chaos. Responsibility without freedom risks stagnation. True human flourishing emerges from balancing both, shaping lives rich in purpose and ethical reflection. Managing freedom effectively requires deliberate strategies. Limiting options to what aligns with values reduces regret and increases satisfaction. Psychologists suggest choice architecture and prioritization to prevent decision fatigue. Sartre would argue that even the act of limiting options is itself a choice that defines our essence. Kierkegaard emphasizes embracing decisions consciously, fully aware of consequences, as a path to authentic living. Literature provides examples of both wise and misguided choice-making. Dostoevsky portrays regret when decisions are made without reflection, while Kundera demonstrates the liberation found in intentional, value-driven actions. Religious perspectives offer guidance. Christianity emphasizes prayerful discernment. Buddhism advocates mindful awareness, and Islam encourages consultation with wisdom and spiritual principles. reflecting on priorities and desired legacy, simplifies choices and clarifies values. Limiting options doesn't diminish freedom, it channels it into meaningful action. Establishing routines, boundaries, and ethical frameworks can mitigate anxiety and foster agency. Collaboration and seeking counsel can also prevent overwhelming responsibility from paralyzing action. Self-reflection, journaling, and contemplation deepen insight into which choices matter most. Freedom is most fulfilling when paired with wisdom, not merely unlimited possibility. With intentional practice, we can transform potential paralysis into clarity, cultivating lives of depth, purpose, and ethical integrity. Our choices extend beyond ourselves, shaping the story of our lives. Sartre reminds us that each decision not only defines us, but also impacts the world around us. Kierkegaard emphasizes that authentic choices give life depth and significance, preventing existence from feeling hollow. Literature shows how choices ripple outward. Dostoevsky depicts characters whose moral and existential decisions affect generations. Kundera highlights the subtle power of everyday choices in shaping identity and legacy. Religion offers perspectives on enduring significance. Christianity teaches that acts of love and virtue leave a lasting spiritual legacy. Buddhism emphasizes actions that reduce suffering and cultivate compassion, creating karmic influence beyond immediate perception. Islam frames choices within the context of spiritual duty and societal impact. The modern challenge is that with infinite options, we may lose sight of long-term consequences, prioritizing short-term gratification over enduring significance. Reflecting on the legacy we wish to leave clarifies priorities and reduces anxiety. Ethical, mindful, and intentional decisions strengthen both personal and communal life. Recognizing the weight of choice inspires gratitude, humility, and courage. Our freedom is an instrument through which meaning, purpose, and connection can flourish. In exercising it wisely, we shape both our present experience and the mark we leave on the future. For those wishing to explore the philosophy of freedom and the burden of choice further, these resources are invaluable. Sartre's Being and Nothingness outlines existentialist freedom, responsibility, and human angst. Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling explores ethical choice, faith, and the anxiety inherent in freedom. Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground vividly depicts the paralysis and torment of excessive choice. Kundera's The Unbearable Lightness of Being examines freedom, identity, and love in the modern world. Podcasts like Philosophize This by Stephen West make complex philosophical ideas accessible, with episodes on existentialism and decision-making. On Being with Krista Tippett often engages with questions of meaning, freedom, and human responsibility. Websites such as the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy offer peer-reviewed, comprehensive explanations of existentialist thought and the ethics of choice. The Future of Life Institute provides essays and research on ethical decision-making in technology and society. Engaging with these works offers multiple perspectives, from literature to philosophy, religion to contemporary commentary. They encourage reflection on how freedom shapes identity, morality, and community. Understanding these insights can help us navigate modern choice with wisdom and intention. By consulting these sources, viewers can deepen their grasp of existentialist thought, moral responsibility, and practical strategies for meaningful living. These resources also illuminate how freedom, choice, and legacy interconnect in daily life. Ultimately, they empower us to approach decisions not as burdens, but as tools for shaping meaningful lives. As we conclude, remember that freedom is inseparable from responsibility. Sartre reminds us that we are the authors of our own existence, condemned to choose and responsible for the consequences. Kierkegaard emphasizes that facing freedom authentically, rather than avoiding it, allows us to live deeply. Literature provides cautionary and inspirational examples. Dostoevsky depicts the peril of indecision, while Kundera celebrates intentional choice. Religion offers guiding principles for exercising freedom ethically, with Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam, each framing choice in moral, spiritual, and communal contexts. Modern life magnifies both the promise and the burden of freedom. Too many choices can create anxiety, but awareness and intentionality transform this burden into a tool for growth. Mindful reflection, prioritization, and value alignment allow us to navigate freedom meaningfully. Every choice, no matter how small, contributes to our identity, relationships, and legacy. Freedom shapes our story, and our story shapes the world. By understanding the weight and significance of choice, we cultivate wisdom, integrity, and purpose. We can act not out of fear or pressure, but with clarity and intention. Freedom, exercised responsibly, becomes a source of joy and fulfillment rather than paralysis. Let us embrace our agency thoughtfully, recognizing both the challenge and the opportunity it presents.